I'm going to preface this by saying that you should probably have this on in the background while you're doing other things. You just play a video game, do your chores, whatever it is you have to do. Treat this like a podcast almost. There's no video, nothing interesting to look at, just me and my words, unscripted. I recommend that you do something else while you listen to this and keep your hands occupied and enjoy my thoughts. This part was pre-recorded before the rest of it, so I was just here to let you know and give you a heads up in advance. Thank you for listening. And so, now we get to Rise of Apocalypse, the first step on our X-Men reading list. This is a fun one. This one is written primarily by Terry Kavanagh, who not actually much of an X-Men writer. Well, I guess it's wrong to say. He wrote a substantial amount of X-Men stuff. His body of work includes a substantial amount of X-Men stuff, so I guess it's wrong to say he's not really much of an X-Men writer. In fact, never mind, that actually makes up a substantial amount of his body of work. But he's primarily a Spider-Man writer. That's where he's most known from. This is penciled by Adam Pollina. I looked him up. He's apparently a guy discovered by Stan Lee himself, and that's how he got a job at Marvel, but he did not work at Marvel for very long. In fact, this miniseries is probably the most notable thing he's done during his tenure at Marvel. He first did, I think, X-Force, did a couple issues of Generation X, I think an issue of Iron Man. He came back for another miniseries, which is actually not it's a little far on our reading list, but he came back to do that, and then he stopped doing comic books. He left the comic business. He started doing other stuff. Moved out of America and started doing a bunch of other things outside of comic books, but still in the realm of art. Interesting, I guess. Terry Kavanagh, writer here, he's written quite a bit of stuff. Primarily, I think he wrote X Factor. His connection to the Age of Apocalypse is that, so with Age of Apocalypse, they canceled all the X-Men books and replaced them with new books that would take their place throughout the event's duration. Because the idea was the Marvel universe as we knew it was gone and replaced with this terrible dark future. So therefore, until the old future was restored, we would get this dark future. And all the books would be replaced with versions set in this dark future. So Uncanny X-Men was replaced with Astonishing X-Men. The regular X-Men book was replaced with Amazing X-Men. Excalibur was replaced with Excalibur. X-Force was replaced with Gambit and the Externals. Wolverine was replaced with Weapon X, etc., etc. And Terry Kavanagh wrote X-Universe, the replacement for X-Men Unlimited. X-Men Unlimited is an interesting comic because it was published irregularly. It had a very irregular publishing schedule because it was basically just an anthology. Each issue was just a different writer, different artist, random X-Men story. Sometimes it'd take place with whatever was being published concurrently with it. Sometimes it'd just be a random story. And the Age of Apocalypse replacement was X-Universe, which Terry Kavanagh wrote. He wrote X-Universe. This was published here in 97. You can tell by the very 90s looking CGI X-Men logo there, which they used back then. A lot of people kind of associate that weird 90s CGI looking X logo there with the crap era X-Men, because there's generally this prevailing mindset, I've noticed, that a lot of 90s comics, the 90s were a dark age for comics and especially Marvel. I don't think that's true in the slightest. I think the 90s were a great era for comics. A lot of comics I love are from the 90s, in fact. My favorite X-Men story is Age of Apocalypse, and Age of Apocalypse is a very 90s story. And we'll get to that eventually, long way down on the list. I'm gonna love talking about that. And when I started getting people to read this reading list, Rise of Apocalypse is the first thing, and this is a hurdle for a lot of people I've noticed, which is why I've started feeling less like this is a must-read, and feeling that opinion has softened a lot. Because one person I got to read this was criticizing the art viciously, and they gaslit me into thinking Adam Pollina's art was bad. And I was starting to think, yeah, Adam Pollina, wow, yeah, to be fair, a lot of art Marvel had in the late 90s was starting to become anatomy nightmares and weird, contorted, whatever, very, so stylized to a point that it was hard to tell what was going on. There were books like that. There's a precedent, and I get where that comes from. But I think it's easy for a lot of people online to cherry pick examples and then upload that and make that a YouTube video with their thesis and trick a lot of normies into thinking that, which I think somehow happened to this person. They were sending me screenshots of choice things from the comic where half of the pictures were actual examples of that penciling here not being great. Other examples dude, you're just misinterpreting what's happening in the art. Oh, yeah, you're right. I get that. I like Rise of Apocalypse. A lot of people are mixed on it, but I quite liked it. When I was going into this rereading, I was expecting Adam Pollina. Again, I was gaslit into thinking Adam Pollina's art wasn't very good. So I was coming in expecting Adam Pollina's art to just not be very good, and I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it reminded me of Prince of Egypt in a good way. Like, the Egypt setting, a lot of people say, oh yeah, Apocalypse's whole history and ancient Egypt isn't very important. And to be fair, it's not. It doesn't play much of a part in Apocalypse's future stories until Age of Apocalypse specifically, and even then, it doesn't play that much of a part in that at all. So I get it. I very much like this. One of the things I like is that it ties into Fantastic Four. Which issue of Fantastic Four is that? The Rama Tut is the villain here. Rama Tut, he's a Fantastic Four villain, and here he is in an X-Men comic. Rama Tut is a distant relative of Reed Richards. He was the time-traveling pharaoh, Rama Tut. Fantastic Four number 19, classic Stan Lee, Jack Kirby issue of Fantastic Four. Rama Tut is there. He takes Susan Storm as his concubine. And they tie that into the story of this comic beautifully. Well, I don't know if beautifully is the right term, but wonderfully. They do a wonderful job tying it into this classic issue of Fantastic Four. So I'm going to go over the plot. Minor spoilers ahead, nothing like too major. Though, if you don't want to read this and want to skip it on the reading list, go ahead. Or if you've already read it, you have nothing to worry about here. But if you just want to go in spoiler-free, feel free to click away. I'm only going to be giving minor spoilers. I'm not going to be telling, like, the major, like, oh my gosh moments in the comic. Not that there's a whole lot. So, Apocalypse is originally N'Saba. That's his name. He's a baby who was born with a weird defect that made him look, honestly, kind of horrifying to look at. Any of you remember that episode of, Watch Friends? There's this episode where Ross and Rachel are at the hospital to determine, like, their baby, and they decide, like, well, nope, we're not going to see the gender. They look at this thing of babies there, and then Rachel says, which one of these babies do you think is the ugliest? And then Ross is like, Rachel, they're babies. Babies are inherently cute. You can't just... Then Rachel says, which one? And Ross is like, yeah, you're right. That one's ugly. Her eyes skim over the paper. Ross thinks she's looking at the gender of the baby, which they agreed to not look at until, like, birth. And then Ross is ashamed. Like, shame on you, Rachel! Ugly baby judges you! Well, to me, like, baby Apocalypse in this comic is exactly how I imagined the ugly baby they were talking about looking. When Ross was like, ugly baby judges you, I just imagine, like, baby N'Saba. That's my mental image. So, he's left there because he's just royal child, just horribly born looking ugly and just, like, pale... white. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, what's with this pale white baby? Horrifying. So they just throw him to the desert. Warrior tribe finds him. They determine, like, this baby is, like, must be linked to a prophecy about he who will lead mankind and be like a god. And so that's when this whole myth happens, and they decide that this is the child of that myth. Their leader determines that, yeah, I will raise him and will see to it that his destiny is fulfilled. And he trains Apocalypse in the way of the sword and to be a skilled fighter. And Rama Tut, who is he's the villain here. He's like, I've heard about he knows about the myth, and he's concerned. He doesn't think it's a threat, but he's concerned. So he's just, we need to go and dispatch this filthy tribe and kill that baby N'Saba, who is now an adult by this point. And then when they get the upper hand on Rama Tut's forces, N'Saba adopted father tells him that we need to go to this temple. We can take you to fulfill your destiny. Rama Tut will not see it coming, and then that's where you see, like, the cover for number 2 there, Destiny's Cruel Hand, where he gives his father, like, gives up everything to, like, make sure N'Saba gets to see to his destiny. And then the Fantastic Four show up. Like, this runs concurrently with that classic issue of Fantastic Four. I could have technically added that Fantastic Four issue to the reading list here if I wanted to, but I didn't because no X-Men thing anywhere shows up there. It's just that ripples into this story, but this doesn't ripple into that story. And Rama Tut abandons his fiancée to take Sue Storm as his new wife. He thinks Sue Storm's hot. Now the fiancé he abandoned falls in love with N'Saba, and N'Saba is confused. What is there for me now? He's now conflicted. I must overthrow Rama Tut. Do I lead mankind like I was born to? What is mankind? He ponders, what is mankind? Are they worthy of his leadership? Is he worthy of them? What is his role in all of this? He ponders this, and it's legitimately interesting to see this. I think the writing is a little hammy and cliched at points, but again, the way that a lot of, like, the climax and everything and plays into the ending of that classic Fantastic Four issue is great. I think the way that ripples into this story is awesome because Rama Tut gets to be a villain here, and it expands on that classic Fantastic Four issue, adding a bit of, like, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby-ness into this decidedly, like, very 90s story, which is awesome, and I think it's cool. And so it's just great to see. And the ending is sad. I like the idea that Apocalypse, being this psychopath, could have been avoided. Just the thought that this could have been prevented if he was shown more kindness, more compassion. If he was not so loathed, he could have been someone nicer, kinder, someone who could have led humanity on a prosperous future. And I think that kind of plays into a lot of the greater themes of the X-Men in a way. Because the X-Men try to protect humans, the humans who loathe and fear them. The X-Men are hated and feared, and yet they go and they save mankind. That's what they do. Be better than them. Be the bigger person. Be an example to them. Show them that mutants aren't to be hated or feared. And yet they still are. They want to persist and keep saving them. That's a big theme of the X-Men, and to see this, a lot of that theme, a lot of that thematic element used here in a different way. Apocalypse is one of the first mutants to play a major role in the history of the Marvel Universe, that just have any significance in its ancient history. He's the first. And the first mutant there is hated, feared. The people he loves either are taken from him or cannot reciprocate that feeling back. And he's left to be hated and live a cold, lonely existence, which just makes him create a very negative opinion of mankind. In a way, he's kind of like Magneto in that sense. Whereas Magneto's a lot more sympathetic, because Magneto's a Holocaust survivor. And he fears that by mankind continuing to do what they want, they're going to create another Holocaust. They're going to do a Holocaust on the mutants, and so we have to kill mankind before they can kill all the mutants. Like, that's what he thinks. Whereas Apocalypse, his thesis isn't that we need to dethrone mankind before they have the chance to exterminate us. Apocalypse is of the opinion that mankind isn't worthy of life. Magneto just thinks, like, mutants are better. We need to let the mutants take over and preside over mankind before mankind does the same to us. Apocalypse determined mankind is not worthy of existence. They have proven that they are full of hate, ignorance, and are incapable of rational thought. Therefore, they need someone to just take the reins and show them subservience, knock them down a peg, humble them, and guide the world through to, like, his vision. He's the only person fit to overthrow mankind and lead the world. He is the god that the world needs to properly navigate the various dark times they're in. It's up to him. And I think that's a very interesting kind of thing. He's a good thematic counterpoint in that way to the other mutants. Reading this just reminded me that why Apocalypse is, I don't know if he's my favorite X-Men villain, but he's up there. I love him. And again, I think this is a great story. I think I was telling people, like, go before this, yeah, it's mid. You don't have to read that if you don't want to. But I actually really enjoyed this. I get it. Adam Pollina's art is highly stylized. I actually, the other miniseries Adam Pollina did for Marvel when he briefly came back actually made me love his art so much more. He changed his style drastically when he did it, but it really made me see that his art is just hyper stylized. He's being inked here by, I think, Liquid, which is a digital firm that inks and colors comic art. And Liquid was very popular back in the 90s. They're responsible for a lot of, like, the very, I guess, especially now dated style of coloring and inking that was popular back then. A lot of that is stems from Liquid. And I think that Liquid does a good job. I think a lot of the imitators don't, but I think Liquid does a pretty decent job. Pollina's art is very stylized. It's not like full, like, Anatomy Nightmare, oh my gosh, what am I looking at, like some people say 90s comic art is like, but I wouldn't say the art here is amazing, but it's very stylized in a way that is pretty charming. Like I said earlier, it reminds me of The Prince of Egypt, which is a great movie, DreamWorks animation. The art kind of reminds me of that, though this is 97, I think, so I think this might predate The Prince of Egypt. The way things are, they're very round and curvy and everything like that. Not a lot of, like, hard angles and edges here. It's very stylized. It's not particularly realistic. When Joe Quesada took over at Marvel in 1999, something he did was institute a Marvel house style. Back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they had a house art style. But during the 80s, that house art style kind of fell by the wayside. as a bunch of artists with their own style came in, and their unique art styles really became noticeable and grabbed readers' attention. And Quesada didn't like a lot of the really exaggerated, hyper-stylized art, and he used specifically like a lot of these Anatomy Nightmare kind of examples of why that art isn't very good. And so Quesada instituted a new house style at Marvel, which was a lot more realistic, and Quesada fired a lot of the very stylized kind of like artists. He took over as editor-in-chief in, I think, 1999 when Marvel got out of their bankruptcy. So I think Pollina might have been one of the artists that got fired during this firing of a lot of the more stylized artists. Most of the artists in Marvel did not survive and got replaced with more realistic artists who could draw more realistically. And I think that the art saw a definite improvement in quality under Quesada, but I think it was also a massive overcorrection, because looking at stuff like this just really makes me realize that I really like stylized comic art. The realistic stuff is nice, and so is like the classic Marvel House style, and yeah, the Marvel House style Quesada introduced is nice too, but I really just think that Quesada's works and everything like that, and what Marvel did in the 2000s has conditioned people into thinking this kind of art is not great. And the art is not amazing here, but once you learn to kind of F with weird stylizations here, it really grows on you. It really appreciates as you continue. I read this in a trade paperback format. It included the Fantastic Four issue that is featured, and it also featured this issue of the Black Knight. I really enjoyed the Black Knight comic that came with this. Here he travels back to the past with Sprite, one of the Eternals, and the two are stuck at the past, and some of the people he knows are there, but also like they're not the same versions. Like it's them, but it's not quite them, and they're going to do a raid on this lair which is controlled by Apocalypse. He's been hiding out here in the aftermath of the events of this series, and he makes the Black Knight do combat with one of his closest friends who has decided to become one of Apocalypse's thralls. And it's an interesting story. It's not like a must-read or anything like that, but it's a neat thing. I'm not going to put like any comics where like Apocalypse appears as like a guest villain such as this one on the reading list. Apocalypse is an X-Men villain, but him being in a thing doesn't make it an X-Men story, you know? Whereas this, though, is different because this is his origin story. He is one of the most dangerous, evil, powerful villains that the X-Men have ever had. And therefore, I think learning his origin, I don't know if it's necessarily important, but definitely something worth note. And so that's why I think it's really earned its spot in the reading list here. Again, I'm not going to revoke this thing's status as a must-read on the list, but I can tell you that there's lots of arguments to be made for why you can skip this. It is not essential, but I would recommend it. But I think to somebody who's not already an X-Men fan, who is like reading my reading list as a newcomer, I think this is definitely a skippable entry, because if this is your first impression of the X-Men and Marvel, this isn't going to win you over. Hichikara, when she read this, she wasn't too impressed. Her opinion was like, it's okay. Like, it wasn't bad. That was basically her opinion. And I get that. I can get why a new reader wouldn't think that anything particularly strong of this. In her opinion, it's basically like, yeah, the art's okay, the writing's okay, nothing here was like really amazing. I'm like, oh, it gets better, trust me, and it does. Next thing on the reading list is really good. I say really good, but it's kind of controversial too. But rereading this for this video, I really enjoyed it. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Very enjoyable, pretty good, but it lacks anything like to particularly push it to the level of greatness. I forgot quite a few details of this until I ended up rereading it, and I'm like, oh yeah. A lot of the things I complimented this book for, but in particular, like the Fantastic Four connection and the thematic like counterpoints to the main themes of the X-Men, the whole broader themes there, were about the only things I particularly remembered outside of like, again, like my joke about like ugly baby judges you. I think I should just tell you that this is not the most memorable or impressive book. This is just, again, the Black Knight story. I actually think I liked the comic with the Black Knight fighting Apocalypse more than I did any of the actual issues of this comic that were included in the trade paperback. So that should tell you where my mind was. But yeah, unfortunately for this reading list, we're not coming out swinging. But this is a chronological thing, and as chronologically the first thing, it's interesting. It's got a nice tie to ancient Egypt, which is cool, but it's not amazing. And I think that, yeah, can be a deterrent for anybody who hasn't read X-Men before, checking out my reading list. But I'm happy to have this as the first entry. I quite liked it. What did you think of the comic? Let me know. I think it'd be cool to to discuss this more now that I've freshened my mind and I've found like appreciations for it I may not have had previously. Did you like it? Did you like the art? Did you like the writing? Did you think En Sabanur's arc was cool? Did you like the Fantastic Four connection? What did you think? Let me know. I'd like to hear it. But for now, that is all. See you next time when we talk about one of my personal favorite pre-X-Men X-Men comics on the next one. Bye-bye.